GB News is jointly owned by a hedge fund manager, Sir Paul Marshall, and investment firm Legantum, under the umbrella of a holding company, All Perspectives Limited, which is headquartered in London, right? GB News started broadcasting in 2021 and is owned by All Perspectives Holding, right? So, this is the thing what you've got to understand, okay? So, the basis is that if GB News or Jacob Rees-Mogg, right, who's been paid by GB News, right, if he does not give something to the voters, to the electors, right, then he hasn't committed an offence, right? Now the thing is, you might say then, okay, so if the electors give money, give something over, buy something, they're not being given anything, right? They haven't received anything for free, sort of thing, like, you know, like if they go to a shop and buy something, they bought it. If they pay for their TV license or TV streaming service, they've bought it. So Jacob Rees-Mogg or GB News haven't given them anything, right? But the basis of that is that, so if that was the case, right, if that was the case, then all of the money, right, you know, like the BBC, right, the BBC is, okay, license fee payer, right, so we all pay the license fee to the BBC, right, and with that money, okay, with that money, they make programs, right? And the programs have got a budget, right? The programs of the BBC have got a budget. So when they make, you know, like Murdering Successful or, you know, Doctor Who or something, there's a budget, right? They're allowed so much money. Now, the BBC itself also does toys and things like that, but they use the money from the budget, right, to get toys made and sell them to make more profit, so they've got more money. But ultimately, right, we pay for the BBC, so they're not giving us anything, right, that we haven't paid for, because we're the license fee payer, right? So it's funded by us, right? So they can't say, oh, we've given you something, some things come from somewhere where you haven't paid for, right? And that's definitely the difference between GB News, what's going on here with Rees-Mogg, right? Because, right, if Mogg, right, was not providing entertainment to you, okay, if it was only you who had bought it and paid for it, and that's what you've paid for, right, then why do they need this? What's all this here? All this on the screen, right? All of this here on the screen, all this hedge fund something, right? It's from a third party, right? It's money coming in, sponsorship money, funding money, right? And that, right, is a pot, right? What do they call it? A hedge fund, right? They even call it a hedge fund, right? That pot, right, is nothing to do with, right, when you pay for a TV streaming service, right? You paid for that TV service, okay? This is why on YouTube you don't pay anything, right? You don't actually pay YouTube anything. In fact, right, because you don't pay YouTube anything at all, right, you have to watch advertisements. You have to watch them. You're made to watch them. They're actually, you're getting the whole thing for free. It's a gift. YouTube is a gift, right? And it's paid for by adverts, right? YouTube is a gift because it's free, right? Anyone on the internet can go on there, right? But notice that you've paid for an internet connection, but the internet connection that you paid for, right, it's got nothing to do really with YouTube, right? But when you choose to go to YouTube, they're actually gifting you all this stuff because you don't have to buy anything on YouTube. You can join channels and you can pay if you want, but it's free, right? But you're subjected to the adverts, and the adverts influence you. Now, if the adverts influence you in an election, that is you're receiving a free gift, which is going to influence the outcome of an election, right? Now, the thing is that, so when Google Ads, it has to be classified and categorized, right? Google Ads, if it's for an election, it has to be classified like, like Rachel Reeves, right? Or Labour, and it says paid for by Labour. Now, Labour have paid for that advertisement, and it is categorised under their campaign fund under the law of agency, and it's all accounted for and checked by the government in spending, and that is officially registered and classified to affect you in an election, right? And they've paid for it, and it's accounted for, right? And it is a gift because you haven't paid for it, right? Because YouTube is free. You don't have to pay for it, but you have to be subjected to the influence of the advertisements, right? Now, the BBC, right, we buy it. We pay for it. The actual BBC, we pay for and buy the BBC, right? Now, so all of it's paid for and it's budgeted, right? So everything that we get back, we've paid for, right? We bought that. Now, this is the difference between what is going on with all this Reese Mogg, these hedge funds here, this Michael Grade, Lord Grade, Michael Grade, Ofcom, all these companies that are supposed to be monitoring this, the Electoral Commission, the police who the Electoral Commission are meant to report offences to, which I didn't know that. I thought they had their own prosecutors, but they can issue fines. Reese Mogg was fined. He was given a fine and he broke some rules, but it wasn't a criminal prosecution. Someone could have brought an election petition against Reese Mogg if they'd have wanted to, but you have to put the money up front, right? The government won't pay for it if you contest his seat. If there are certain other offences, the police can prosecute, but under the agency of Parliament, certain things have to be done through election petition. Now, this is the argument with, like, Michael Westwood's petition for call a general election, which also gives evidence to Parliament of Labour misrepresenting for their campaign. Now, this is the thing, right? With Parliament can hear election petitions. The law hasn't been changed. Parliament can hear election petitions, and everyone's got the right to sign them. They're not allowing them on e-petitions, and the more compelling signatures you've got, it more makes them act on it. Now, the Speaker of Parliament can warrant a in a committee to investigate an election, right? Now, if there's a lot of arguments over a lot of seats to do with one election, then, why would you do it in separate courts? I would be, if Parliament, if the Petitions Committee expect that Michael Westwood should have gone to, should have paid £1,000 for an election petition, it's still a petition, right? And you can still get other people to support and sign it. So, theoretically, what would the court have done if it had said, right, here's my election petition, here's my £1,000, because it's only 1,000 or whatever. It used to be £1,000, right? That's in the Act of Law, but it might have changed. And what happens if you've got 1 million people signed, right? The money and the cost for it come from all the people, so that they share £1,000 up between them. But if you've got 1 million people, that's 1 million witnesses and 1 million signatures and 3 million who you want to give evidence. Now, are the Royal Courts of Justice going to facilitate a case where they've got what happens if you call a million witnesses to give evidence, because that's how many people signed it? Now, the court would not be able to facilitate that. I mean, and this is why really Parliament can facilitate investigations and inquiries. You see, if there's something so big and important that 3 million people backed it, I mean, there's got to be around the similar numbers for Hillsborough. Surely that would merit an inquiry, an actual public inquiry. 3 million people is such a massive number that it would appear to a minister that there is great concern and public concern that would necessitate him to appoint an inquiry into Labour. Did they misrepresent in their election campaign? Right? That's a resource. A public inquiry is a resource which the government have got, which they can make use of to investigate these things that are very big. 3 million people want to give evidence, right? That's bigger than Hillsborough. So why the government are not going to act on it, I don't know. They're being obstructive. And at the least it deserves a committee investigation, of the Labour MPs. But so that I'm talking about election petitions there, right? Really, there should have been an election petition against Reese Mogg, but you're meant to bring them within a certain time after the election. But there's no time limit for having it in Parliament, because under parliamentary law, you've always got the right to petition about something. In fact, when I read the law on it for Parliament, it cannot be within 14 days. It has to be outside of 14 days before the starting and ending of Parliament petitions. So, or actually, outside of 14 days by the election. So it can't be within it, because they've got to receive the results and get organised and things like that, and then you can bring it, right? So they can process everything after the election, right? So we can petition Parliament about Rees Mogg, but the best way to petition them is to have it on e-petitions, because you want a lot of signatures, and if you just write it, if Michael Westwood just writes his complaint in a hand petition and 20 people sign it, even if it's got evidence to show that Rees Mogg broke the rules, they still might not do anything. Now, you compel them to do it by demonstration, which is a strong representation, a very powerful and compelling argument, which is brought by an immense number of people, right? But they're saying with public petitions that they're not going to allow petitions like for forfeiture committee, petitions for elections, petitions for all these things that they've got committees for and departments which can be referred to make them act. But they won't run it on e-petitions because they just don't want people to see it and know about it. Effectively, they don't want there to be a very strong, compelling public argument, because they don't want to act on it, and then they don't want people to be right, basically, and that's it. So, either way, Mogg needs to either be investigated by the police or Parliament. And so going back to GB News and Mogg, right? So GB News actually is provided on YouTube, right? We're not talking about the television, when you pay for television and streaming. We're talking about YouTube, right? YouTube's got nothing to do with the internet in terms of money, right? You pay for the internet, that's it. It's like you've got a phone line, Your telephone line's got nothing to do with any company, really, unless you ring them up, right? But when you ring up a company, you pay for the phone call, right? So, for example, right, I telephone, right, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I paid 10p for that, right? I called him, right? Now, if we go on YouTube, right, and, I don't have to pay any money to go on YouTube, right? When you pay your BT phone line, right, you've already paid for the phone line, right? But when you ring a particular number, you've still got to pay, right? But you only pay for that particular connection, right? Now, on YouTube, GB News have a presence and Moggs there, right? And when you're just browsing YouTube and it's popping up suggestions, right, you might get Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, you haven't paid him any money. You haven't purchased anything from him. You haven't given him money to entertain you, right? You haven't bought anything from him, but he's there, right? And he's influencing you, right? Now, okay, YouTube's free. Now, this is the difference between the BBC, right? Now, Mogg is influencing you. Now, people can lie all they want, right? Mogg is a politician. He was only asked on the show because he had the elected privilege of being a politician, and all of his fame is privileged fame. No one would have knew that he was on the face of planet Earth unless he was elected, and then people got to know who he was by being in the public eye through the privilege of Parliament, right? So then they want him on the show because he's a politician, right? And he's got an opinion on politics and other things, but either way, he's still Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, he is having a direct or indirect effect on elections leading up to them and after them, including his own. Particularly a direct effect in South Somerset and an indirect effect on the rest of the country, and that is a fact. And I love to go into court to argue that with Michael Grade, with Lord Grade, because I am not wrong, right? That is true. And Mogg is having an influence on elections, including his own, where he lost, right? Now, the entertainment itself is the gift, right? He doesn't need to give you money, right? Give you £10 to vote for him. Give you a tip, right? He doesn't need to give you a rosette or buy you a sandwich. He's entertaining you, and the content of the entertainment is influential, directly or indirectly, on Conservative Party elections, because he's there. He is the presenter, right? He's the entertainer, and they're saying that it's not a news show. If it's not a news show, then it has to be an entertainment show, right? Now, this is the thing. If it was the BBC, if it was the BBC, you would have paid for all that content, right? You would have purchased and bought it, and then they have a, all the different programs, right, have all got funding limits on them, right? Now, GB News, right, over the internet, slightly different on TV because you do buy the television, but unlike the BBC, right, there's money. Some private persons who are listed here on this screen, all these hedge fund people and so forth, they own GB News, and they're putting private money into GB News and getting sponsorship, right? And that is a sum, money, right? So that is a gift of money, a sum, a privately provided gift and sum. It hasn't come from you, like the BBC license fee comes from you, and then they provide all the content with it. You go on YouTube, it is a free gift, right? And a private entity, right, as gifting a massive amount of money, and they're doing this on purpose to make a point, and they're desperately trying to bend the rules and break them, for God save them for the future, because they want to scrap the entire thing, because this is the future of controlling politics in the country, right? This is the project they're doing, and they're doing it by gradually changing it, but through deception, because they wouldn't actually be allowed to do it. But that's they say how you make change. So they're protesting against the current rules, and they're managing to get away with it when it's illegal. But they don't actually have an exemption. They are breaking the rules which are set out, right? Unlike us when we're petitioning and everyone's getting arrested, right? People are getting arrested unlawfully when they're meant to have protection, but Jacob Rees-Mogg's getting away scot-free, right? And I don't know what case it was at the court, but it was completely the wrong case and completely the wrong accusation, this stupid fine thing, something he said or did it. It's the entire basis of his presence and him being there, which Michael Grade, Lord Grade, he's a Conservative and Tory, so Lord Grade is already biased to the Conservative Party. Lord Grade, he can't possibly sit impartially on Ofcom on that committee because he's already on the side of Rees-Mogg, right? It's nearly as bad as having a Labour Party speaker and then all these 3 million signatures against the Labour Party, but Lindsay Hoyle will not warrant an investigation into Labour. So Michael Grade, by refusing to properly criminally prosecute Mogg, or getting Parliament to, is the exact same model where the Speaker will not warrant an investigation into the Labour Party misleading people in the election campaign, when there's 3 million people who want that investigation, and the Petitions Committee lied to us, and Michael Westwood's petition contains accusatory evidence. Right? He doesn't have to have a general election. There's still accusatory evidence against the party for their election run campaign, which can be investigated, and it can be decided that they shouldn't have won the seat because they misled people. Right? It can be decided. So the Speaker for Labour now is in the same biased position as Lord Grade is with Rees-Mogg. He won't have him prosecuted. And he can go to the Supreme Court if he wants, right? Or he can make the House of Commons investigate Rees-Mogg, right? So the Grade-Mogg model, currently structure framework with Ofcom, is like Lindsay Hoyle with the Michael Westwood petition, because he won't warrant an investigation to the Labour Party, right? Now, so let's go back to these on the screen here, this hedge fund money and this whole sponsorship of GB News, right? So, a hedge fund, right? If you say that GB News is a pile of money, right? If you see GB News effectively, right, as a pile of money, right, a big pile of golden coins, right? It's not come from you, right? That money's not from you, right? It is not from you. But with the BBC, it is, right? From the BBC, we gave them the money, right? And then they transformed that money into shows, right? But we paid for them. Now, with GB News and this whole Mogg thing, particularly, especially on YouTube, right? A big pile of money comes along, right? Like on here, and they're using the hedge fund thing as like it's a big pair of rods, basically. It's like a big middle finger. It's like a big pair of rods, like FU. It's like we're breaking the rules. It's like getting your will. It's like pissing on the bonfire. It's like they're goading us. They know that it's completely and utterly illegal, right? But they're just stood there with a pair of rods, forking us, going, ha, you can't do anything about it. Like, I'm Rees-Mogg, I'm untouchable, right? Because people don't understand the law properly and the acts of law, all of the election acts and what they actually mean and what they are meant to prevent, right? Now, so with Mogg and GB News, there's a big pile of the money on the table, right? But it's not ours. We didn't give them it, right? It's from somewhere else, right? So that is the gift on the table, right? And that gift, right, is transformed, right, from money into entertainment, pure entertainment, right? But an element of that entertainment is Rees-Mogg. Now, Rees-Mogg receives some of that money himself, right? So some of it gets transmuted into pure entertainment, and some of it goes into Rees-Mogg's pocket, but it's not from us, right? Now, it's from this big company who are paying him, right? Now, and Mogg himself is a politically influential person by his mere presence, directly or indirectly, for who he is. Jacob Rees-Mogg, the famous Conservative MP, and his character, opinion, attitude, and entertaining presence, for better or worse, for richer or poorer. And in his election, it was for worse because he lost, right? But that package, that whole thing, that transmutation is coming at you, right, as a gift, right? But none of that hedge fund money, none of that sponsorship money, and none of that gold from all of this, right, is from your pocket. So this is the receiving of a gift in the form of entertainment, which is influential leading up to, during, or after an election. And this contains an ingredient of Jacob Rees-Mogg, which is the criminal element, right? Now, with the BBC, it's different because the BBC just don't have money there, and it's not coming at you like a gift, right? All of the gold on the table came from your pocket, right? So it's yours. You bought it, okay? You paid for it fair and square, even. So they're not gifting you. And when there is a political element in it, which still can affect, they don't allow, they've been very strict on allowing blatant presenting by MPs. They invite them on and they ask them questions. And they only ever did that. I'm not saying that the BBC haven't influenced politics and it's not all corrupt, but as per the law and rules, that before all this, like, you know, Parliament having their own website, Parliament having their own channel, Parliament just like, you know, Parliament on YouTube, we had to get it from a separate entity. Now, the BBC have got a charter, and they had an obligation to inform us about politics and what was going on, right? So it's almost like having their own kind of BBC sort of channel in a way, but through their own spot, because the charter required them to update us with what is going on. But it wasn't meant to be allowed to include anything which could affect an election. They were basically asked on, just tell us, you know, what the government are up to as the government, not as a political party. Now, when Rees-Mogg is on GB News, he's not there as the government, right? Well, he was there as the government. He was an elected MP. He wasn't the cabinet, but he's still an elected MP. And to stay an MP, how do you become an MP? By getting votes and people knowing about you, right? And that is the fact that it directly affected his election in South Somerset and indirectly affected it in the rest of the country, right? And that is fact. That is the truth. That is the law from these acts. Rees-Mogg's a criminal. Unfortunately, a lady as well, Esther McVeigh. Unfortunately, she's been joined a bad group of people who have like shown her money and fame and stardom, and she's been like a loose woman on morning TV, and fallen head over heels into the whole thing, and been very naive and misled by these gangsters, these people. And you've got Michael Grade who's protecting them all, right? Like the Speaker's protecting the Labour Party because he won't warrant an investigation, right? When there's 3 million signatures. I think there's probably more signatures than they got on Hillsborough to get the... I think that there's probably that petition has got more compelling strength of demonstration behind it to call for a general election than there ever was to get a Hillsborough investigation, although the news and TV and media pushed it. But that's the thing, they can influence power. There's a hell of a lot of football fans wanted it, though. I'm not saying that. There might have been some petitions actually on paper. I might have to look into it. I might be wrong about that. But anyway, so I've looked at the law and I've read it. And when you provide entertainment, it doesn't have to be blatant, full-on influence. It can be indirect, and it's all persons who are connected with it, accomplices and people who are helping out. Now, it's strategically planned for them to make this TV show, GB News, and have these presenters on, like Lee Anderson, Tice, Nigel Farage, and even got Neil Oliver in. Neil Oliver is an enigma. He claims to be standing up for the countryside, for freedom of speech, and all these things, but he's right in there with the he's right in there with the bad eggs, and it's what has made Reform UK has had a debut through this channel. They wouldn't have got on the radar if it wasn't for this method that they've used, and it isn't all down to their campaign funding and election regimes at all. So I'm not happy with Michael Grade at all. What Ofcom did was extremely feeble. It wasn't even anywhere near the truth of what he's been doing wrong. It was kind of like it didn't even hit the dartboard. They slapped him with a fine for saying or doing something. It's his presence. It is the fact that he is a presenter providing a stream of constant entertainment. That is what it is. And it might now be Lord Grade who is the criminal. It's like Lord Grade is the master of Mogg. And Mogg's got a lot of support in the business industry. Used to be driven around by chauffeur-driven cars, getting advertised by Chanel, almost kind of like a political David Beckham when he was growing up, right? So, Mogg's protected by the elite mafia, right? The elite political mafia. And they're trying to crack the entire system because of the new social media. They can't possibly... The Conservative Party and the Labour Party, as we know it, are over, are finished. Keir Starmer must know that now. And there's a desperate fight now for who's going to control the system. They want to do it so that they can make people popular. They can manufacture stars, celebrities, just by tweaking algorithms, right? How they do it with the boy bands. And they want the political celebrities to be controlled by algorithms and popularity, and then if anyone says anything they don't like, then they've got all this list of reasons to demonetize you or knock your views down. That means they're control. That means that the operators, the controllers, are actually controlling your social life and your social standing without a fair trial or laws or courts. It actually means that it's almost like they've got some DJ deciding what's going to happen to the country, Someone's making the law and records, and he's just putting them on and playing them, right? And no one necessarily voted for them. It's all his own decision, right? And this is why we've got to fight this ridiculous Section 230 in America, which claims that it's been able to take down any material even constitutionally protected, so you can't compete with these people on a fair platform, right? When it's impossible, because when they take your stuff down, it's a criminal contempt, it's not civil contempt. That Section 230, actually, you can enforce them and stop them from taking it down, right? You can physically intervene and enforce it, stop it from being taken down if you could get there. Because you're preventing a criminal contempt if it's a parliamentary campaign, and you only really protect them from civil liability. So, suing them for loads of money. If every single person had a political channel and they took it down, they wouldn't be able to afford to pay it all out. Maybe we should do that with these hedge funds that Reese Mogg have got. Maybe we should, take Mogg down. It's like, do you know what it is now? It's just this moment in my mind just clicked what's going on. Reese Mogg is swanning around with what is equivalent to kind of like magical Section 230 immunity that we all don't have, right? Because the Americans say that they're not going to give us it, that we can't have it, right? But he's magically got it because Michael Grade won't pull him off. And instead, he's making up like false fines, which are like throwing water bombs. Like they're not going to do anything. Like, oh, he said something wrong, or he did something wrong, or he broke this rule or that rule. Like throwing water bombs at him when Michael Grade knows very well that he's just going to get a bit wet. He's got no intention of knocking him off. right? At all, when he shouldn't be on there. His presence, being an entertainment presenter and providing entertainment leading up to, through, after an election, influencing people in South Somerset directly and the rest of the country indirectly, right? When a massive gift of money has come along, transmuted it into Reese Moggs, a little bit of it into Reese Moggs' pocket, and the rest into your eyeballs, right? With Reese Mogg being the Conservative influential capacity, definitely when he was running and he lost, right? Michael Grade, Lord Grade, needs to get Mogg off that channel now, right? And Esther McVeigh, and possibly whoever else is presenting still, Farage and Tice, right? And he's not gonna, because he's part of the We're Changing the System club. That it's like, this is the future, and we're changing the whole thing, and we're going to blatantly ignore the existing laws as if they don't exist because we are criminals, and we're going to affect change, and we're going to erase the past, and we're going to make a new future, and in order to do that, we're going to be criminals, right? That's Michael Grade. So, and this is what, unfortunately, what Lindsay Hoyle's doing. With 3 million people sign the petition. You couldn't buy that. It's got no financial equivalent. There's no financial equivalent you could have. It's people's will. I mean, in fact, I couldn't even. How many people did call for the Hillsborough investigation inquiry? I could type it in now. I'll see if there was a petition. Hillsborough is I'll see if there's a petition. Disaster. I'll see if there was a petition. There might have been. I'll see if there was a petition. There's a disclosure one. That got 156,000. Full disclosure of all government documents relating to the 1989 Hillsborough disaster. So 156,000 signed that. It was enough for a debate, but that's nowhere near 3 million, right? There's another Hillsborough petition. These are all on the government website. Hillsborough disaster, the whole truth. We want the government to widen the investigation. So these people want investigation widened. Only 832 signatures. There was one in 2011. Hillsborough petition reaches 100,000 signatures. A campaign to open the files on Margaret Thatcher's discussions about the 1989 tragedy was boosted by high-profile names. A petition calling for the release of cabinet documents. I'll try inquiry. The Hillsborough law proposal discussed in relation to Hillsborough disaster focusing. I don't know how they managed to get the. I think it was just because it was a massive, horrible thing. It was the weight of the incident, like it was such a tragedy. Basically, it was such an atrocity and tragedy itself that it obviously merited an inquiry, right? Just on the facts and evidence and the existence of the incident. But obviously, football has got massive amounts of people behind it, fans. Probably because if 100,000 people wanted the inquiry, just because you didn't have to get the signatures on paper, just the fact that loads of people were talking about it, and there's that many people turning up at football matches. I don't know how many, 20,000 in each stadium or whatever. There were millions of people. That it was kind of like maybe almost like the atmosphere at the football stadium itself, like you just compelled it, sort of thing, rather than getting it down on paper. But from what I found, when they wanted to push further for it, 3 million's a lot of signatures. It's a lot of signatures, and it's a lot of voters, and this is actually politics in who's leading in politics and who's elected to represent us in politics. So I would suggest that the government are playing down those 3 million signatures dramatically, particularly when it includes accusatory evidence, which really should be investigated and can be. It doesn't have to be a general election because it's giving accusatory evidence of an election within the petition, which should be investigated with so many people asking, saying that they were misled, effectively. But, this is the thing, there's so many people complaining on social media now about all many different things that this is the situation we're in. I think Keir Starmer's scratching his head. He's just lost 2 MPs already in by-elections, and then his other MPs can't even do their own privileges claims. They can't even, they're not allowed. They're not meant to be prosecuted for summary offences during the time of Parliament, but yet they're getting driving convictions, minor ones during the time of Parliament, which should have to wait. They're not even. They can't even. They're wanting. I think they're wanting to throw these privileges. They're wanting to throw them. They don't want them themselves, really. But this is the thing. I think that as long as they've got other people who can replace their party and stand for their party, they're not bothered. But anytime now that anything gets said or gets some publicity or gets aired or heard, it's affecting the whole party strongly. So this is why they don't want petitions on e-petitions, which are clever, to wit, or intelligent, because if they start getting a lot of signatures, people will know about it, and then they have to start lying, like with the College General Election petition, and they have to start misleading people when Parliament can warrant committees to deal with election petitions. It always has done. That law's not changed. Nothing repealed it. So that's it. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with this Mogg thing. If Michael Gray does not get Ofcom to phone the police, or if Michael Gray does not, demand Mogg to be disciplined by Parliament, even though he's not an MP anymore, he was at the time that he was privileged, and it was in the jurisdiction of Parliament. Now, what punishment would they do other than remove him? But the thing is, he's still on the programme, and he's still jeering and making a hell of a lot of money, right? When he really should be in prison or banned from voting or banned from TV or something. But he won his case at the High Court, but it wasn't the right case to defend because it wasn't the right charges. It's criminal charges, and that's a criminal charge, so, it doesn't matter whether it's appealed as, civil matter. And also, even if it did have some bearing on it, there's still the Supreme Court. So, I don't know how, I've got all of the law, and I don't really need any evidence from Mogg himself, because Mogg himself is evidence. He is an entertainer, right? And that is it. What the evidence is what is the law? What is the actual law? And this is how I do things. All of my complaints are all. They don't need to get any evidence or any. They don't need any further facts. The fact that Mogg is on GB News providing entertainment, right? It's simple, and it's all down to the law not being properly understood and the law not being properly applied. So the whole thing is to explain the law to people so they understand it and what it is, right? That's it. So, something needs to be done about Jacob Rees-Mogg. He needs to somehow be removed. whether it is, through a criminal action or from Parliament. You see, this is the interesting thing, right? What we're getting is like my channel's been taken down from YouTube, right? And that is a constitutionally protected channel. It is using the privileges of Parliament. No one is putting it back up. No one is acting for me for a subpoena. It's a contempt against me. But yet, Moggs on there. And the 77th Brigade are taking certain things down which are not lawful and not illegal, even though constitutionally protected stuff, right? So why are they taking Moggs down from Section 230 or whatever, otherwise reasonable? It's got anything that's harassing, lewd, frightening, dangerous, or otherwise debatable. Well, it's debatable whether, Moggs is giving in political influence as a presenter, so that's arguable for a start. This is the thing. So what Mog is the protest from the politicians, right? Moggs the guinea pig. Moggs the guinea pig. It's like, this is how we want it to be now, but it can't because it's illegal. But we're going to do it anyway, right? So that's what Mog is. Mog's like the test dummy, the crash test dummy, right? For the new future that they want, that at the moment is illegal, right? But they're not respecting our privileges. They're not protecting our protesters from getting arrested, and they're not keeping our media, which is protected, up on the platforms, even though it's a criminal contempt. And Section 230, you can enforce, you can intervene in someone from committing a crime. When there is a offence, it's enforceable, right? So, the Good Samaritan, Section 230 is just a lot of rubbish. In America, you cannot sue them for damages if they remove your constitutionally protected stuff, right? But I believe that you could stop them from removing it and criminally charge them, right? And Bill Clinton, I don't think he knew what he was doing with that act, or people being misled with it, So this is it. I mean, I don't know what the Electoral Commission are going to do. They're the worst. There are other departments that are easy to work with. I don't like the Electoral Commission at all. But Ofcom probably even worse. I mean, all I can do is complain to the House of Lords, to Lord Grade, complain to the Privileges Committee for past breaches, but I can't see anything getting done over it, because when it is something that is serious that needs something doing about it, they won't do it, and then you'll find these MPs have to step down over this or that, just tiddlywink stuff, the minor things, the sort of insignificant minor things, right? They're stepping down over and playing tiddlywinks, right? But when it's very, 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 very serious, and lots of people have complained about it, up to the number of 3 million, they blatantly refuse to act. So, this is it.